So we're in week 4 of our 13-week series on living the science of mind. Each week is independent, so don't worry if you've missed some of them. Today our focus is on man. Man appears to us as an individual, and yet what we learn from these lessons this week is that there's no individual anything in the universe. Now that might sound a little bit strange, but I hope you'll stick around and allow me to describe this world of law and order that Holmes talks about this week. It's a world in which what we see is a reflection of what we expect to see. A world in which this river of life that is our reading today is beautifully designed to move us forward to our good. But first, the question of the week. What's the one choice that you can make today to know that there is no individual anything in the universe? To recognize that your world reflects what you see in the mirror, and to listen to God with your heart. One more time. What's the one choice that you can make today to know that there is no individual anything in the universe? To recognize that your world reflects what you see in the mirror, and to listen to God with your heart. I want to start by saying that I'm really loving my rediscovery of these essays by Holmes and noticing that there are so many wonderful ideas and gems of knowledge in the pages of this book. So I love that we're reading through it together. I'm hoping that you've gotten a copy and reading along. And there is so much in every week that I have to pick and choose about what we can talk about. And I know that it's in divine order. You probably have noticed that I use the word divine order quite often. It's a reminder to us to just accept the things and the way that they play out in our day. And to remember that we all miss the mark sooner or later, every now and again at least. And in those times, it's just important for us to learn to forgive ourselves and to move forward. A minute ago, I actually paraphrased words of Holmes, and these are his exact words from his essay, The Individual and the Universal. There is no such thing as an individual anything in the universe. I can imagine that maybe you're saying, well, I'm an individual. I have free choice. I have free will. But today, we want to look at how you are actually indeed a part of something much bigger. Emerson said the same thing a slightly different way when he said, there is one mind common to all individual men. There is one mind common to all individual men. This doesn't replace the reality that you and I have free choice, or that you and I have our own ability to interpret our life in the way that we want to interpret it and the way that we see it. I spoke a bit last week about we see God from our own perspective, our own personal God. It's true, and what really works this week is this lesson on man, reminding us that we indeed do live in a world of order. Holmes interpreted Emerson's statement this way. He was saying in substance, you are because God is. You live because God lives in you. Each one of us individualizes the universal mind by our use of it. The sum total of our mental and emotional reactions surrounds us with a field of thought which is operated upon by a larger field of mind, law, and action. Holmes goes on to explain how we individualize the universal, using an analogy of how farmers sow their crop, which I think really gives us an idea of how to clarify this concept of individual and universal. Because it's true that the farmer chooses what crop he wants to sow. And then he has to turn it over to the universe, to the soil in which he sowed those seeds, to the air, to the water, to the elements of the wind and the rain and the atmosphere. So indeed, he has sown his crop, but he's not in total control of how that crop grows. Holmes explains it this way. But the moment he sows the seed, a universal process is set in operation, and that which was individual passes from a point of his conscious volition, selectivity, and will into a universal field of creative reaction. He actually is individualizing the universal. But the moment he does so, his individualization is acted upon by the universal, and thus it becomes a universal operation. That which was individual passes into a universal field of creative reaction. So we make our choices, and at some point we arrive at a place where we recognize that our choice is acted upon by something bigger than we are. Think about some of our earthly forces. Gravity, for instance. We don't really truly have a choice about gravity. Yeah, we can relocate ourselves from one place to another. We walk from one room to another. We drive from one place to another. But the bottom line is that no matter what, gravity is a force that is still acting upon us. If we watch the space stations, you'll notice that things float around. Can you imagine the chaos that would happen if when we set our drinks down on a side table, it just floated anywhere it wanted to? Gravity is actually an exceptional force that helps us. And we've learned as we've grown up, we know how to use gravity. We know when we put something down, it's going to stay there. It's not going to walk away of its own volition. It's not going to float away because gravity is going to keep it right where we put it. We know how gravity works, and we use that knowledge to our own benefit. And the same is true with the universal mind. We can learn how it works and use that knowledge to our benefit. While it might not seem that this one mind is related to this concept of gravity, let's take a look at that for a moment. Let's suppose that you have a thought. Did you make up that thought, or did it come from some larger creative reality? Here's what Holmes has to say on that very topic. The creativity of thought is not dependent upon the thinker. Only the choice of thinking is dependent upon the thinker. The creative activity of thought belongs to the universe. I guess the question for you at this time would be, are you willing to accept that you are part of something bigger? That there's no individual anything in this universal one? And in accepting that, recognize that, as Holmes wrote, one of the things we must come to understand in dealing with the laws of spirit is that we are still operating on a realm of law and order. We are operated upon by gravitational force. While it is true that we can change our individual position in it, it is also true that whatever position we take, we are still operated upon by it. You know, we hear that same concept in the Bible when it says, as a man sows, so shall he reap. We can't get away from whatever it is that we're sowing, we're reaping. Whatever it is we're seeing is what comes back to us. Our thought is very powerful. Another of Holmes' essays this week was The Ego, in which Holmes describes the real ego, which is the Christ in us. This is the way he wrote it. This is the hidden source of life, the place where Christ in us blends on one side with the divine and on the other side with the individual. This is the way the Bible tells us there is but one mediator between God and man, which is Christ. That thought of Christ binding the divine with the individual, it touches my heart. Think about it. When we live from our individualized ego and think we're separate from that one life, our life goes downhill. Many used to say, it's going to hell in a handbasket. In his essay, Holmes used Job from the Bible as an example of this. Now, in case you don't know the story of Job, Job was a very wealthy man living with his large family. He had extensive flocks and a lot of crops. And the book of Job opens with Satan in heaven coming to accuse Job before God, insisting that Job only serves God because God protects him and God gives him all this wealth. So Satan challenges God that if he was given permission to punish Job, Job would turn and curse God. So God decided to allow Satan to torment Job to test his bold claim. But he forbade Satan from taking Job's life in the process. So along come the plagues and the illness, and Job loses his family, his wealth, he even loses his health. His friends come to comfort him and they say, this must be because you have sinned. It must be a punishment for your sins. And Job's saying, but I haven't done anything. I think sometimes we're all in that state of denial that we have really been living in a way that wasn't exactly in alignment. Job, however, remains devoted to God through all of this. And he contends all along the way that his life has not been one of sin. When another friend comes by and tells him to humble himself and submit to God and to use the trials as a way to purify his life, Job finally gets it. And he begins to question God himself. He begins to settle those questions in his heart to see what lessons he can learn. Well, the story ends well because in the end, Job is restored to health. He has happiness and prosperity, even beyond what he had when Satan started to confront him and send all of these plagues. In the Living the Science of Mind, Holmes wrote that Job remembered there is an integrity to the soul, a reality to the spirit. What a beautiful way to put it, an integrity to the soul, a reality to the spirit. What a reminder of our spiritual identification. And that in any time of trouble, what we need to do is discover God, to go within, to ask those questions of what's mine to do and what's mine to turn over. Job shows us how to keep faith, no matter how grim the circumstances might be. Sometimes the stakes seem to be enormous. In the unseen world, those armies of darkness are always defeated by our faith. If when we're going through some time of struggle, we remember to discover God right within us. Holmes reminds us in his writings, anything that separates us from an understanding that we are one with the whole, bars it from coming to self-expression through us. And all we have left is the acquired ego, which is not enough to meet the issues of life. It soon flounders and becomes submerged. All we have left is the acquired ego. When we forget that we're one with the whole, when we forget that we can go to the divine at any time and turn over whatever our troubles happen to be, do what's ours to do, and let the rest go. Be part of that divine wisdom. I think it's true that sometimes when we reflect what's going on in our life, we forget that what we see is a reflection of our thoughts. We allow ourselves to be separated from the truth that God is right where we are. We let our ego convince us that we can solve our problems ourselves, that we can meet these issues all on our own, that we are strong enough to do this. I spent years being strong enough and struggling. I love that Holmes reminds us that when we're in this state, we flounder and become submerged. We become submerged in the problem rather than knowing that right where we are, right within us, there is a solution if we just turn it over to the divine. All we have to do, like Job, is ask God. How we see the world is through our own lenses of life. If we walk on the planet believing we're a failure, what we see is all our failures. If we walk with a sourpuss face, what we typically see is a world of gloom. When we put a smile on our face and walk with an uplifting way, what I've noticed is we tend to see smiles and lightness in the world. In his essay, What I See in the Mirror, Holmes writes this: "Here is one of the keys to successful living and right relationships among people. It is only when we are whole within ourselves that we can help others. It is only when we have faith that we can instill faith. It is only when we have hope and enthusiasm that others respond to us with an equal hope and enthusiasm." When talking about how we see ourselves and the world around us, I sometimes use the analogy of when we go out to buy a new car. If you've decided to buy a Honda, what you notice is all of a sudden there seems to be a whole lot more Hondas on the road. And the truth is, the number of Hondas out there hasn't increased, but rather because you've opened your eyes to noticing them, it appears to you that they've increased. So what is it you want to start noticing in your world? That's a really important question. What is it that you want to start noticing in your world? When you look in the mirror, who is it do you want to see staring back at you? Gloom and doom? Failure? Or love and light? Holmes put it this way: if we could come back to see that life is like a mirror, tending to reflect back to us the images of our own thinking, then we should realize that by changing our thinking, we can change the reflections in the mirror. Remember, a mirror's only job is to reflect what's in front of it. We often say, change your thinking, change your life. And it's that way with the law. The law reflects what is put in front of it. That's why Holmes wrote this. You see, the mirror is merely something that reflects. You cannot scratch the reflection out of the mirror, but you can change the image in front of it. And you are the image maker. So let us create new images, which will reflect new patterns. And we must be definite in our conviction and deliberate in our aim if we expect happy results. For theories are no good unless they are applied. Theories are no good unless they're applied. So your next question might be, how do you want to create the life that you're living? What reflection do you want to put in front of that mirror? What images do you want to see, and are you willing to aim for those results? A while back I did a whole talk on aim. When we place our attention on our intention, that's what we manifest. And by the way, since we are all part of the one life, it seems we should also have a sense of responsibility to help our fellow man to see this world from a place of conscious living in the same way that we're working on that ourselves. I'm not going to go into my deep belief that everything in life is either love or a call for love. I'm sure you've heard me talking about that regularly. I'm just going to remind you that the next time someone ruffles your feathers, the next time you feel the need to be right, it might be a kinder place to put love in front of your mirror so that love becomes what is reflected back to you. Because I do believe that there's an energy of other people feel what we're sending out. That's why we do our sending out love every week in our healing part of our service. When we help our fellow man, Holmes writes this: his mirror will begin to change its reflection. This will create hope and is only a short step from hope to faith. Through his experience, we shall learn the great lesson of life, that the good we have must be shared with others if it is to be increased. The good we have must be shared with others if it is to be increased. We create our lives in how we react to what's happening in our world, as well as how we respond to our fellow man. Émile Coué, who was a French psychologist and pharmacist, actually said that when the imagination and the will are in conflict, the imagination invariably wins. He actually was the one who introduced a popular method of psychotherapy, which is self-improvement based on optimistic autosuggestions. He coined this phrase: day by day, in every way, I am getting better and better. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. He suggested that people repeat it rapidly so that we could break down the self-consciousness of our intellectual barriers and hammer this thought into that self-realization. Now, imagine how we might see our reflection in the mirror if we repeated that phrase as an affirmation every day. Do you think that you would start to feel better and better? I've often said that we should listen to our heart, because I've always felt that our head can lie to us because our ego gets involved, but our heart never lies. In his essay, God Talks to Our Heart, Holmes wrote, we could coin no better expression than to say that God speaks to the heart through a language of feelings, a feeling which is affirmative. I believe that man actually often relies too much on thinking and too little on that feeling that we have in our hearts. Sometimes we just really dig in and want to be right instead of going to that place in our heart that says, we could send a little love out right now. Holmes went on to write this: Through some unknown avenue, the heart reaches a depth that the intellect can penetrate only mathematically. Through some unknown avenue, the heart reaches a depth that the intellect can only penetrate mathematically. Of course, we have our own emotions and our own convictions, and we still want to be able to think, and we want to be able to have choices in our lives. And this requires balance. That's why Holmes wrote this: "The best psychological balance is the balance between the intellect and the emotions, the conscious mind and the feelings. We want not only to feel, but to think. We wish not only to think, but also to feel." You might recall in the reading today that Gloria read a section where she said that we really don't have the power to destroy that river of life. We can only mold and remold it. So I want to end by reminding you of how that reading today ended with words that I believe give us hope that is much needed, and hope that we are indeed, day by day, in every way, getting better and better. Here's what it said: "For in spite of all our misdirection, we are still being carried forward on the bosom of this infinite stream to a harbor of perfect safety. We may rest in absolute assurance that good will be the final goal of all things. We can hasten the advent of this good by definitely clarifying our thought and by daily meditating upon the invisible source, the wellspring of life within each one of us." For me, I know that I love that visualization of being carried forward on the bosom of the infinite stream to a harbor of perfect safety. So I'm wondering if you're willing to clarify your thoughts and meditate regularly so that you can participate in that wellspring of life that's within each one of us that Holmes was speaking of. So in summary, decide this week to truly aim for allowing the individual you to pass into that universal field of creative reaction. Know that there is no individual anything in the universe. We operate in a realm of law and order. There's something bigger than we are, that one mind. So recognize that your world reflects what you see in your mirror. Remember, there is an integrity to the soul, a reality to the spirit. Create new images which will reflect new patterns of wholeness. Listen to God with all your heart and repeat every day, day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Clarify your thought and meditate regularly so you can participate in that wellspring of life of which Holmes was speaking, that wellspring of life that lives right within you. So here's your affirmation for the week. How is it that I so easily and willingly make the choice today to know there is no individual anything in the universe? To recognize my world reflects what I see in my mirror, and to listen to God with my heart. And your challenge for this week is to truly listen to the divine who speaks to your heart. To aim for the individual you to know that it's part of a universal whole. And to notice the reflection in the mirror. And tweak that reflection so that you get more and more good. Because then we can live from that presence which dwells within us. Let's pray. So we just take a deep, nourishing breath. And we really embrace this message that there is no individual, anything in the universe. Knowing that God is all there is, and that we are an individual expression of that divine with our own free will, with our own choice. And what I know is that each of us can make the choice every day to be better and better, to find our spirituality, to become even more in tune with that wellspring of life that's within us. So I'm grateful. I am so grateful for this community. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be rediscovering how to live this science of mind, how to truly live from the wholeness of who we are. And it's from all that gratitude that I release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action. Because what I know is the truth, is that whenever we ask, God says yes. It's like Job. Whenever we figure out that we can go to God, our problems all seem to dissipate into something that's a greater wholeness of life. So I know that God's already said yes. So I can call this good. I can say amen. And together we can affirm it. And so it is. We have a special offertory song that we sing to remind us that it is in giving that we receive, that it is in sharing our good, that that good is returned to us multiplied abundantly.